The chilled porcelain plate made a soft, almost apologetic clink as Beatrice placed it on the corner of the vast marble island. Upon it sat the remnants of last night's roast chicken, a single, rather sad-looking drumstick, and a spoonful of withered peas. The plate was for Lily, her 10-year-old niece, a child with eyes that held the quiet, ancient wisdom of sorrow. Lily looked from the plate to her aunt, a silent question hanging in the air of the cavernous, minimalist kitchen. Across the island, Beatrice's own daughter Amelia, who was the same age as Lily, was being presented with a mother-of-pearl spoon and a small crystal dish. Inside the dish, nestled on a bed of crushed ice, were glistening black pearls of Osetra caviar. Amelia wrinkled her nose, a practiced expression of mild disdain she had learned from her mother. "Is this the good kind, Mummy?" she asked, her voice carrying the entitled nonchalance of a child who had never known a moment of want. "Only the best for my little star," Beatrice cooed, ignoring Lily completely. She was a woman sculpted from ambition and sharp angles, her every movement a declaration of her own importance. She saw the world as a hierarchy, and her primary duty was to ensure her family remained firmly at its apex. Watching this cruel little tableau from a stool at the far end of the island was Alara. She was Lily's older sister and legal guardian, though to an outsider, she appeared more like a poor relation, a ghost haunting the edges of this opulent life. Her clothes were simple, her posture unassuming, her expression unreadable. In her lap, her fingers rested on a plain, slightly worn leather satchel. Beatrice thought her sister was a quiet, struggling architect, burdened by the sudden guardianship of a younger sibling after their parents' tragic accident. She believed Alara's presence in her home was an act of profound charity on her part, a temporary arrangement while Alara supposedly scrambled to find a more stable footing. Beatrice enjoyed the power dynamic. She savored the quiet gratitude she mistook for weakness, the deference she interpreted as awe. In her mind, she was magnanimous, a benevolent queen offering crumbs from her table. She thought she was teaching Lily, and by extension Alara, a valuable lesson about the natural order of things. Some people ate caviar, others ate leftovers. What Beatrice didn't know was that inside Alara's simple satchel was a single, deceptively thin manila envelope. And inside that envelope were documents that represented a force more powerful than wealth, more devastating than social ruin. It was a meticulously crafted, legally airtight demolition order for the entire world Beatrice had so carefully constructed. Within a week, the woman serving leftovers as a power play would find herself begging for scraps of mercy. The grand stage she performed on would be dismantled, board by the silent, underestimated woman she had tried so hard to diminish. The lesson about the natural order of things was indeed about to be taught, but not by the person who thought she held the pointer. We're about to watch a carefully constructed world of arrogance and cruelty come crashing down. It's a story about the quiet power of patience and the devastating impact of underestimating the person right in front of you. If you love stories where justice is served not with a loud bang, but with the quiet, undeniable click of a well-sprung trap, you're in the right place. Go ahead and hit that like button and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We love seeing how far these stories travel. Now, let's get back to the moment the first crack appeared in Beatrice's perfect world. The arrangement had begun 6 weeks prior, born of a manufactured crisis. Alara's life had been irrevocably altered a year ago, when a sudden, brutal car crash had claimed both her parents, leaving her, at 28, the sole guardian of her 10-year-old sister Lily. The age gap had always made their relationship more parental than sibling-like, and Alara had stepped into the role with a quiet, fierce determination. She managed the estate, the grief, and the sudden, overwhelming responsibility with a methodical calm that unnerved the rest of their extended family. Beatrice, her older sister by 5 years, had been the most vocal with her sympathy, a symphony of performative sorrow. "Oh, you poor thing," she had sighed over the phone, her voice dripping with a pity so thick it was insulting. To be saddled with all that, a child, the finances, it's a miracle you're holding up. Elara had simply replied, Lily is not a saddle, Beatrice. She's my sister. The call had come 6 weeks ago. Elara, darling, Beatrice had trilled, I have the most wonderful idea. I know how much you're struggling to balance that little architecture career of yours with, well, everything. Richard and I were thinking, why don't you let Lily come and stay with us for a month or two, just until you get that big project you mentioned off the ground. It would be a change of scenery for her. She could spend time with Amelia. We have the space, goodness knows. The big project was real, but it was not architectural. It was a silent, complex, and utterly ruthless financial maneuver, the culmination of a year of patient, disciplined work. It was the reason Elara needed to be in the city, close to the nerve center of the operation, but it also required her complete focus. Beatrice's offer, dripping with condescension as it was a perfect, unforeseen gift. It placed the final piece of the puzzle directly into her hand. That's very generous of you, Beatrice, Elara had said, her voice carefully modulated to sound grateful and slightly overwhelmed. I don't know what to say. Say yes, you silly girl. It's settled then. It will be our little act of charity for the year. Richard's always saying we should give back more. Elara had felt a cold knot tighten in her stomach at the word charity, but she had pushed the feeling down. This was strategy. Emotion was a liability. So she had packed a bag for Lily, filled with her favorite books and a well-loved stuffed bear, and driven her to the gleaming, sterile mansion that Beatrice called home. The initial days were a study in false kindness. Beatrice paraded Lily around like a prop, a testament to her own generosity. This is my niece, Lily, she would announce to her friends at the country club. Her sister, Elara, you remember, the artistic one, is just swamped. We're taking her in for a while. It's the least we could do. The facade began to crack within a week. It started with small things. When Elara came for a weekend visit, she found Lily's drawings, usually vibrant and full of life, had been relegated to a small, dark corner of the playroom, while Amelia's more pedestrian scribbles were framed and spotlit on the main wall. Amelia just has a natural talent, don't you think? Beatrice had commented, a sly smile playing on her lips. Some are born with it, I suppose. Then came the issue of clothes. Elara had sent Lily with a suitcase full of new, high-quality, but unbranded clothing. Beatrice took one look and declared it all simply not up to snuff. She took the girls on a shopping spree. Amelia was lavished with designer dresses and tiny, branded handbags. For Lily, Beatrice navigated to the back of the store, to the sales rack. She held up a gaudy polyester dress 2 sizes too big. There, she said loudly, for the benefit of anyone listening. This is much more practical. No sense spending a fortune on things that will just get ruined on the playground, is there? Lily's shoulders had slumped. Elara, watching from a distance on one of her visits, saw the light in her sister's eyes dim just a little. She didn't intervene. Not yet. Instead, she went back to her temporary apartment, a Spartan space overlooking the financial district, and opened her laptop. She didn't look at architectural blueprints. She looked at stock portfolios, at encrypted communications with her legal team, at the slow, deliberate acquisition of shares in a mid-sized but respected engineering firm, Sterling Solutions, the company owned by Beatrice's husband, Richard. Each slight, each casual cruelty Beatrice inflicted upon Lily was not met with an emotional outburst from Elara. It was met with a purchase order. Every condescending remark was transmuted into a block of shares. Every tear Lily shed in private was converted into another percentage point of ownership. Elara was not building a case for revenge. She was executing a hostile takeover of a toxic asset. And the company was just the beginning. Elara knew Richard well. He was not a bad man, merely a weak one. He was a man who lived in the shadow of his wife's overwhelming personality, a passenger in the luxury vehicle of her ambition. His company, Sterling Solutions, had been his grandfather's. It was a legacy he was terrified of losing, a fear Beatrice exploited with surgical precision. The company had been facing headwinds lately, market shifts, a couple of lost contracts. Richard was stressed, distracted, his usual quietude curdling into a perpetual state of anxiety. Ilara decided to have a conversation with him during one of her weekend visits. She found him in his study, a room paneled in dark wood and smelling of old leather and new fear. He was staring at a spreadsheet, his shoulders slumped in defeat. "Richard," she said softly from the doorway. He jumped, startled. "Ilara, I didn't hear you come in." "I'm worried about Lily," she began, skipping the pleasantries. "She seems subdued. Beatrice's methods can be a bit abrasive." Richard sighed, the sound of a man deflating. He ran a hand through his thinning hair. "That's just Beatrice," he mumbled, the classic defense of the enabler. "She doesn't mean anything by it. Her heart is in the right place." "Is it?" Ilara asked, her voice calm, devoid of accusation. It was a simple question, a pebble dropped into a still pond. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like she's using my sister as a prop to make herself feel superior. It looks like cruelty, Richard." He flinched at the word. He looked around the opulent study, at the framed photos of his smiling wife and daughter, at the awards his company had won in better years. He looked at everything but Ilara. She's very conscious of appearances. She wants the best for Amelia, for us." "And what about Lily? Doesn't she deserve to be treated with basic dignity?" Of course," he said, wringing his hands. I'll talk to her. It's just things are very stressful right now. The business, we've lost a few key accounts. We're stretched thin. Beatrice is feeling the pressure too." Ilara's gaze was steady. The dramatic irony was so thick she could almost taste it. Richard was complaining about his company's financial woes to the very person who was systematically buying it out from under him. The mysterious market forces he was battling had a name, and she was standing right in his study. "I'm sorry to hear that, Richard," she said, and she was, in a way. She was sorry he was so completely out of his depth, so blind to the reality of his own life. "I hope things turn around for you." He missed the double meaning entirely. "Thank you, Ilara. I appreciate that. And I will. I'll speak to B. I promise." He never did. The promise was as empty as the reassurances he gave his investors. 3 nights later was the dinner party. It was the third and most public humiliation. Beatrice had gathered her flock of equally status-obsessed friends. Over artisanal cocktails and impossibly small appetizers, she regaled them with a story. "You simply cannot imagine what it's like," she began, her voice pitched for performance. "We're trying to do a good thing, you know. Take in my poor niece. But the girl has, well, no sense of decorum. The other day she asked if she could have some of Amelia's caviar. Can you imagine? I had to gently explain to her that some things are for some people, and other things are for others. It's a life lesson, really. A difficult one, but necessary." The table tittered with manufactured amusement. Ilara, seated at the far end as a courtesy, felt a hot flash of pure rage, a rare and unwelcome sensation. She looked at Lily, who was seated beside her, dutifully pushing a piece of lettuce around her plate. The child's face was a perfect, heartbreaking mask of neutrality, her attempt to become invisible. But Ilara saw the tremor in her lower lip. She saw the way Lily's hand clutched the napkin in her lap until her knuckles were white. Ilara reached under the table and gently took Lily's hand. She gave it a firm, steady squeeze, a silent message. "I see you. I am here. This will not stand." Lily's fingers curled around hers, a desperate, grateful grip. Later that night, long after the guests had departed and the house was silent, Ilara sat in her small, temporary apartment. The city lights glittered below, a sprawling circuit board of human endeavor. The anger had subsided, replaced by a crystalline, cold resolve. She opened her laptop. The screen glowed in the dark room. On it was an email from her lead attorney. Subject: Final phase. The body of the email was brief. All necessary shares have been acquired. Your position is unassailable. We await your signal to proceed. Ilara typed a single-word reply: stand by. She closed the laptop and walked to the window. She looked not at the glittering skyscrapers, but at her own reflection in the glass. Her face was calm. Her eyes were clear. The architect was about to become the demolition expert. The foundation of Beatrice's world was rotten, built on a bedrock of arrogance and insecurity. And a quiet, patient woman was about to press the detonator. The final weekend before the storm broke was deceptively beautiful. A perfect, crisp autumn Saturday descended upon the manicured lawns of Beatrice's suburban estate. The sky was an impossibly deep blue, the air scented with wood smoke and decaying leaves. It was the kind of day that belonged on a postcard, a picture of idyllic domestic tranquility. The illusion was flawless. Beatrice was in her element, gliding through her home with the smug satisfaction of a monarch surveying her kingdom. The source of her elevated mood was a phone call she had received the previous day from a deliriously relieved Richard. "You won't believe it, Bea," he had exclaimed, his voice cracking with emotion. "We're saved. An investor, a holding company I've never even heard of, they came out of nowhere. They bought up a controlling interest, injected a massive amount of capital. They're restructuring everything, but the company is safe. We're solvent." Beatrice, whose understanding of finance was limited to the spending of money rather than its creation, heard only the good news. "Oh, darling, that's wonderful," she had cried. "I knew you could do it. This calls for a celebration, a party, the biggest one we've ever thrown. We'll show everyone that the Sterlings are back on top." Her arrogance, now bolstered by this sudden reversal of fortune, reached new heights. She found Ilara in the garden, sketching in a notepad. Lily was nearby, carefully tending to a small patch of marigolds, one of the few places in the sprawling estate where she seemed to find a measure of peace. "Ilara, just the person," Beatrice said, her voice bright and brittle. "Now that all this unpleasantness with Richard's business is over, I've been thinking about you. It's simply not sustainable for you to be rattling around in that dreadful little apartment, trying to make ends meet with your drawings." She gestured vaguely at Ilara's sketchbook, where a complex, beautifully rendered structural diagram was taking shape. To Beatrice, it was just doodling. "I've decided," she announced as if issuing a royal decree, "to offer you a position, a real job. You can be my personal assistant. You're organized, I'll give you that. You could manage my social calendar, run errands, help me plan the party. It would give you a stable income, and you could be here, close to Lily. It's the perfect solution." Ilara looked up from her sketchbook, her pencil stilled. She looked at her sister, at the condescending smile, the pity radiating from her like cheap perfume. She saw the absolute, unshakable conviction in Beatrice's eyes that she was offering an act of supreme generosity. This was the moment, the final data point, the last piece of evidence for a trial that had already been decided. A slow, calm smile touched Ilara's lips. It was a smile Beatrice had never seen before. It held no gratitude, no deference. It held power. "No, thank you, Beatrice," Ilara said, her voice quiet but carrying the weight of finality. Beatrice blinked, taken aback. A refusal was not part of the script. "Don't be silly, Ilara. It's a wonderful offer. You won't get a better one." "I think," Ilara said, slowly closing her sketchbook and placing it in her satchel, "that it's time we all had a talk. You, me, and Richard. Together. In the study. Now." The request, delivered as a calm statement of fact, was so out of character that Beatrice was momentarily speechless. The tone was not one of a supplicant, but of a CEO calling an emergency board meeting. "A talk? What on earth about?" Beatrice stammered, a flicker of annoyance crossing her features. "I have a caterer to call, invitations to approve." "The caterer can wait," Alara said, standing up. She brushed the grass from her simple trousers. "The invitations may need to be revised." She walked past her stunned sister toward the house, her stride purposeful. As she walked, she pulled her phone from her pocket. Her thumb moved with practiced speed across the screen, pulling up a single contact. Marcus Thorne. She typed a short, simple message, the culmination of a year of patient planning. "Thorne, it's time. The south entrance in 15 minutes. She hit send without breaking stride. The quiet before the storm was over. The wind was beginning to pick up. The air was electric with the promise of a reckoning, long delayed and thoroughly deserved. Beatrice, flustered and annoyed, followed in her wake, completely oblivious to the fact that she was walking toward the complete and utter demolition of her own life. The study felt different. The air, usually thick with the scent of Richard's anxiety, was now charged with a new, unfamiliar tension. Richard, summoned from his celebratory haze, stood by the fireplace looking confused. Beatrice swept in, her annoyance having blossomed into full-blown indignation. "All right, Alara, this had better be important," she snapped, tapping a perfectly manicured finger on the face of her gold watch. "I have a call with the party planner in 10 minutes, and she bills by the quarter hour." Alara stood in the center of the room, a picture of calm. She had placed her worn leather satchel on the polished mahogany surface of Richard's antique desk. She didn't look at Beatrice. She looked at Richard. "Richard," she began, her voice even and measured, "you told me your company was saved by a mysterious investor, a holding company." Richard nodded eagerly, grateful for a topic he understood. "Yes, EL Consolidated, an absolute godsend, came out of nowhere. We're still trying to get a meeting with the principal, but their lawyers have been very direct." "EL Consolidated," Alara repeated slowly, letting the name hang in the air. She turned her gaze to Beatrice, who was examining her nails with theatrical boredom. "Beatrice," Alara said, and her sister's head snapped up, surprised by the authority in her tone. "On Tuesday of last week, at approximately 6 p.m., you served my sister, a 10-year-old child in your care, a plate of cold leftovers while your own daughter ate fresh salmon with asparagus." Beatrice's mouth fell open. "Is that what this is about? You dragged us in here to complain about a meal? My God, Alara, you've lost your mind." "On Friday," Alara continued, her voice unwavering, a metronome of memory, "you took the girls shopping. You spent over $2,000 on designer clothing for Amelia. You bought Lily a single $20 polyester dress from a clearance rack, and you did it in front of her, making a point of her status as a charity case." "I was teaching her the value of money," Beatrice hissed, her face flushing. "At your dinner party 3 nights ago," Alara went on, her eyes locking onto Beatrice's, "you used Lily as the punchline to a story for your friends. You called her a burden. You mocked her for a moment of childish curiosity. You did this while she was sitting at the same table, listening to every word." Richard shifted uncomfortably. "Alara, perhaps this isn't the time." "This is precisely the time," Alara said, her voice dropping, becoming quieter, more intense. "For 6 weeks, you have subjected my sister to a campaign of systematic emotional abuse. You have treated her not as family, not even as a guest, but as a thing, a tool to burnish your own ego, a mirror to reflect your own perceived magnificence." Beatrice let out a sharp, incredulous laugh. "Oh, this is rich. The little charity case is trying to lecture me on morality? You, who can't even afford to properly care for your own sister? You, who came crawling to me for help?" Alara showed no reaction. The insults were like stones thrown into a deep, calm lake. They simply disappeared without a ripple. She reached forward and placed her hand on her satchel. The leather was cool and smooth beneath her fingertips. "You believe I am poor," she stated. It wasn't a question. "You believe I am struggling. You believe I am weak. Your entire perception of me, of my worth, is based on these assumptions. It is the foundation upon which all your cruelty is built." She unclasped the satchel. With deliberate slowness, she withdrew the plain manila envelope. It seemed to absorb the light in the room. She held it for a moment, then placed it gently on the desk in front of Richard. The soft sound of paper on wood was as loud as a gunshot in the silent room. "You are mistaken on all counts," Alara said, her voice now barely a whisper, yet it filled the room. "Beatrice, you asked what this was about. You thought it was about leftovers. You are wrong." She looked from her sister to her brother-in-law, her gaze as sharp and as clear as a shard of ice. "This is what it's about." Richard stared at the envelope as if it were a venomous snake. His hand trembled as he reached for it. Beatrice scoffed, crossing her arms. "What's this? Your latest sob story? A bill you need me to pay?" He didn't answer. He had opened the flap and slid out a thick sheaf of documents. His eyes scanned the first page, a summary of corporate holdings. His brow furrowed in confusion. He flipped to the next page, a list of board appointments. His breath hitched. He flipped again to a signature page, and his face went completely, utterly white. The color drained from him as if a plug had been pulled. "Richard, what is it?" Beatrice demanded, her voice sharp with irritation. "Stop being so dramatic." He looked up from the papers, his eyes wide with a dawning, catastrophic horror. He looked at Alara, truly seeing her for the first time. The quiet, mousy architect was gone. In her place stood a figure of immense, terrifying power. "E.L. Consolidated," Richard whispered, his voice a dry rasp. "It stands for Ilara and Lily." Beatrice's condescending smile froze on her face. "What? Don't be ridiculous." "It's not ridiculous," Ilara said, her voice calm and clear as a bell. "It's fact. For the past year, since my parents passed, I have been managing their estate. Unlike you, Beatrice, who squandered your inheritance on status symbols and appearances, I invested mine. I built a private equity firm, a very successful one. My big project wasn't designing a building, it was executing a corporate acquisition." She took a step closer to the desk, her presence dominating the room. "Your company, Richard, was vulnerable, poorly managed, over-leveraged, and ripe for a takeover. Over the past 6 weeks, while you were distracted and your wife was busy torturing my sister, my firm acquired a 51% controlling stake in Sterling Solutions. I am the mysterious investor. I am the principal. As of 9 a.m. yesterday, I own your company." The silence that followed was absolute. It was the sound of a world ending. Beatrice stared, her mouth slightly agape, her mind refusing to process the information. It was impossible. It was a joke. But the look on her husband's face, a mask of pure, unadulterated devastation, told her it was true. You can't," Beatrice stammered, the words catching in her throat. You're an architect." "I am," Ilara agreed. "I design things, and I deconstruct things. I understand structures, Beatrice. Financial structures, social structures, family structures. And I know a faulty foundation when I see one. Yours was rotten to the core." Richard sank into his leather chair, the documents spilling from his nerveless fingers onto the floor. He looked like a man who had just been told his entire life was a lie. In a way, he had. "My company," he breathed, "my grandfather's company, is now my company," Alara stated, without triumph or malice. It was simply a fact. "And as the new majority shareholder, I will be calling an emergency board meeting on Monday morning to vote on a new direction for the company and a new CEO." Just then the doorbell chimed. a soft, melodic sound that cut through the suffocating tension in the room. Beatrice jumped, a flicker of her old self returning. "That must be the caterer. I told him—" "It's not the caterer," Alara said quietly. A moment later, the housekeeper appeared at the study door, looking flustered. "Ma'am, there's a gentleman here to see Miss Alara. He says his name is Marcus Thorne." Alara nodded. "Thank you, Maria. Please show him in." A man entered the study. He was tall, dressed in a severe but well-tailored dark suit, and carried a leather briefcase. He radiated an aura of calm, implacable authority. He nodded once to Alara, a greeting between allies, before turning his attention to the wreckage of the room's other occupants. "Beatrice, Richard," Alara said, her voice now formal, "I'd like you to meet Marcus Thorne. He's an old family friend. He's also the lead prosecutor for the state attorney's office, specializing in the child welfare and financial crimes division." Beatrice's last vestiges of color drained from her face. She looked from Thorne's emotionless professional face to Alara's calm, resolute one. The trap had not just been sprung, the doors had been locked, and the walls were closing in. Marcus Thorne did not sit down. He stood beside Alara, a silent pillar of official power that fundamentally altered the room's dynamics. The study, once Richard's sanctuary and Beatrice's stage, now felt like a sterile interrogation room. "Mr. and Mrs. Sterling," Thorne began, his voice a calm, professional baritone that carried no hint of emotion. It was the voice of a man who dealt in facts, not feelings. "I'm here at the request of Ms. Alara Vance, in her capacity as the legal guardian of the minor child, Lily Vance." He opened his briefcase on the desk, the clicks of the latches echoing in the tense silence. He didn't remove any papers. The gesture itself was enough. "As Ms. Vance has just informed you," he continued, "the matter of the corporate takeover of Sterling Solutions is a private financial transaction. It is entirely legal, if perhaps unusually motivated. My presence here is not related to that." A tiny, desperate flicker of hope appeared in Beatrice's eyes. It was immediately extinguished by Thorne's next words. "My presence here concerns the welfare of the child. Ms. Vance has compiled a significant body of evidence documenting the treatment of her sister during her 6-week stay in your home." "Evidence? What evidence?" Beatrice spat, finding a sliver of her old defiance. "It's her word against mine. A disgruntled, jealous sister." Alara spoke, her voice still quiet. "Not just my word, Beatrice. When I agreed to let Lily stay here, I was still her legal guardian, staying here part-time myself on weekends. I was concerned about leaving her in a new environment. So with Richard's blanket permission for me to make myself at home, I placed several small, high-resolution security cameras in the common areas of the house: the kitchen, the playroom, the living room. They are voice-activated and have been recording for 6 weeks. Richard looked up, his face a canvas of betrayal. "You spied on us? In our own home?" "I documented the environment I was placing my sister into," Alara corrected him calmly. "And the documentation is damning." Thorne picked up the narrative seamlessly. "We have footage of meals being withheld or deliberately substituted with inferior food as a form of punishment or class distinction. We have audio of repeated verbal abuse, including disparaging remarks about the child's social status, intelligence, and worth. We have a consistent, documented pattern of behavior that constitutes, under state law, severe emotional and psychological abuse." Beatrice swayed on her feet, reaching out to steady herself against a bookshelf. The world of legal statutes and official charges was alien to her, but she understood the gravity in Thorne's voice. "Furthermore," Thorne added, his gaze settling on Beatrice, "Ms. Vance provided a generous monthly stipend to you, via direct bank transfer, for the explicit purpose of Lily's care, food, clothing, and enrichment. We have receipts showing that money was instead diverted and used to purchase luxury goods for yourselves and your own child. That, Mrs. Sterling, is misappropriation of funds, which can be prosecuted as a form of fraud. The reversal of fortune was absolute. It was dizzying in its speed and totality. An hour ago, Beatrice had been the queen of her castle, magnanimously offering a pity job to her poor relation. Now she was a potential criminal, facing public disgrace and legal sanction, her fate resting in the hands of the very person she had so thoroughly despised and underestimated. She did the only thing she could think to do. She collapsed, not into a faint, but into a pleading, desperate heap of her former self. "Ilara, please," she sobbed, the sound ugly and raw. "Please, you can't do this. Think of the family. Think of the scandal. Think of Amelia. What will this do to her?" It was a masterful, if desperate, pivot, an appeal to family, to mercy, to the protection of an innocent child. It was the same tactic she had used her whole life to get her way, but it had no effect on Ilara. "I have been thinking of a child, Beatrice," Ilara replied, her voice cold. "I have been thinking of Lily. I have been thinking of the damage you have done to her sense of self-worth. I have been thinking of the tears she cried when she thought no one was watching. You didn't think of Amelia when you were teaching her to look down on her own cousin. You were so busy teaching her about her superiority that you forgot to teach her about compassion. This too is a lesson, a difficult one, but necessary." She had thrown Beatrice's own words back at her, and they landed with the force of a physical blow. The moral mirror was reflecting an image so ugly Beatrice could barely stand to look at it. Richard, silent until now, finally spoke, his voice hollow. "What do you want, Ilara?" It was the question she had been waiting for, the surrender. Ilara looked at him, then at her weeping sister. She felt no triumph. She felt no joy. She felt only a grim, weary satisfaction, the feeling of a surgeon after a long and difficult operation to remove a cancer. "Want?" she repeated. "I want my sister back. I want her safe. I want her to grow up in a world where her worth is not determined by the price tag on her dress or the food on her plate." She paused, then delivered her terms. "Mr. Thorne is here as a courtesy, to show you the strength of the case against you. I have not yet asked him to file charges. Whether I do depends entirely on what happens next." The unspoken threat hung in the air, more potent than any shout. The power had shifted. The diminished now held all the cards. The arrogant were left with nothing but the consequences of their own choices. A week later, the world had been remade. The tremors from the seismic shift in the study had radiated outwards, rearranging the landscape of their lives with brutal efficiency. For Beatrice and Richard, the first stop was a lawyer's office. They sat, pale and diminished, in plush leather chairs that now seemed to mock their fallen status. Their high-powered corporate attorney, a man they had once golfed with, listened to their story with a deepening frown. "Let me be clear," the lawyer said, steepling his fingers. "Financially, you have no leverage. Ms. Vance's takeover of Sterling Solutions was aggressive, but impeccably legal. She controls the company, period. As for the other matter," he sighed, looking at them with a mixture of pity and professional exasperation. "If she has what she claims to have on video, you are in a very, very precarious position. My advice? Do exactly what she says." The first of Ilara's demands came via a sterile corporate email. An emergency board meeting for Sterling Solutions was called for Monday morning. Richard attended, wearing a suit that suddenly seemed too big for him. He walked into the boardroom his grandfather had built, and at the head of the long, polished table sat Ilara. She was not dressed in her usual simple attire, but in a sharply tailored power suit, her hair pulled back, her demeanor all business. The transformation was so complete it was disorienting. She did not berate him. She did not gloat. She conducted the meeting with a cool, terrifying efficiency. The vote was a formality. Richard was removed as CEO and chairman of the board. Then, Elara made her proposal. "The company will be restructured," she announced to the board. "We will be implementing a new ethics and governance charter. As for Mr. Sterling," all eyes turned to Richard, "his institutional knowledge is valuable. I am proposing we retain him in a non-executive advisory role in the engineering department. The position comes with a standard salary for that level and no stock options." It was a masterstroke of calculated mercy. She did not cast him out completely. She did not humiliate him in front of his colleagues. She simply demoted him. She stripped him of his power, his title, his unearned wealth, but she left him with a job. She left him with a shred of dignity, forcing him to earn his living not as a legacy owner, but as a simple employee. He was being offered a chance to work, to contribute, to rebuild, but on her terms. Richard, numb and broken, accepted. The consequences for Beatrice were less tangible, but more socially devastating. Elara's second condition was not delivered by a lawyer, but in a quiet phone call. There would be no public charges, no scandal in the papers. In exchange, Beatrice had to do two things. First, she was to transfer a sum of money, equal to every dollar she had spent on luxury goods in the past 6 weeks, to a trust fund Elara had established for Lily's education. Second, and far worse for Beatrice, was the party. The grand celebration of their resurrected fortune. Elara's condition was simple. The party goes ahead, you will not cancel it. You will stand up in front of all your friends and you will tell them the truth. Not the whole truth, but a version of it. You will tell them that due to Richard's mismanagement, the company was failing. You will tell them that it was saved not by him, but by me. You will announce my appointment as the new CEO. It was social suicide, a public ritual of humiliation, far more potent than any courtroom could devise. Beatrice balked, she raged, she pleaded. But the alternative, the looming threat of Marcus Thorne and his video evidence, was infinitely worse. The night of the party was a surreal spectacle. The house was filled with the braying laughter and clinking glasses of Beatrice's social circle. Beatrice herself was a ghost at her own feast, her smile a painted-on grimace. Finally she stood, glass in hand, to make her toast. The speech, drafted by Elara's legal team, was a masterpiece of controlled demolition. It spoke of new directions, of passing the torch, of welcoming new leadership. To the unknowing, it sounded like a gracious transition, but to Beatrice, every word was a hot coal in her mouth. And to the inner circle who knew of Richard's supposed triumph, it was a baffling, humiliating retraction. Elara was there, of course. She stood at the back of the room, holding a glass of mineral water, watching her sister perform this final act of surrender. There was no triumph in her eyes, only a quiet, somber observation. She had held up the moral mirror, and now Beatrice was forced to see her own reflection, stripped of all its flattering illusions. The appearance, at last, matched the reality. The days that followed the party were quiet. The grand house, once a stage for Beatrice's performances, now felt like a mausoleum. The silence was heavy with unspoken resentments and shattered pride. Elara had taken Lily back to her own apartment, a bright, airy space that was smaller than Beatrice's walk-in closet, but filled with more warmth and laughter than the entire mansion had ever known. Elara's new home, purchased with the first dividends from her now publicly acknowledged financial success, was a testament to her true nature. It was an architect's dream: clean lines, natural light, functional spaces designed for living, not for impressing. It was beautiful, but it was not ostentatious. There was a small, sunny room filled with art supplies for Lily, her vibrant drawings now covering every inch of the walls. There was a cozy reading nook piled high with books. It was a home built on a foundation of love and security, not status and fear. One evening, as they were making dinner together, Lily asked the question that had been hovering between them. "Is Aunt Beatrice mad at us?" Elara paused her chopping, turning to face her sister. She knew this was a critical moment. The truth, tailored for a 10-year-old's heart. "Aunt Beatrice isn't mad, sweetie," Elara said carefully. "She's learning. Sometimes grown-ups make bad choices. They get confused about what's important. They think having fancy things is the same as being a good person. And when they act unkindly because of that confusion, there are consequences. Like a timeout for grown-ups. Aunt Beatrice and Uncle Richard are in a timeout right now." Lily seemed to consider this. "So we won't see them for a while?" "We'll see," Elara said. "The important thing is that you are safe and you are loved. And you will always have the very best of everything that matters." She tapped Lily's chest gently over her heart. "The good stuff, in here." Meanwhile, in the silent mansion, a different kind of lesson was unfolding. The consequences were not just for Beatrice. Richard, stripped of his title and authority, was forced to confront the man he had become. He went to work every day at the company his grandfather had founded, now taking orders from people he used to command. The humiliation was a bitter pill, but with it came a strange sense of clarity. Without the pressure of being the boss, without the constant fear of failure that Beatrice had stoked, he began to remember the man he had been before, an engineer who loved to build things. He also had to look at his daughter, Amelia. The child was confused. Her world, once so stable and predictable, had been turned upside down. Her mother was a weeping, fragile stranger. Her father was quiet and sad. The constant flow of gifts and praise had dried up. For the first time, Amelia was facing a world that did not revolve around her. This was Richard's choice. He could sink into bitterness, or he could try to build something new from the rubble. One evening, he came home from work and found Beatrice staring blankly at a home shopping channel, a pale imitation of her former self. He turned off the television. "B," he said, his voice quiet but firm, "we need to talk. We need to get help. For us. For Amelia." It was the first time in their marriage he had taken the lead. It was a small step, but it was a beginning. He started therapy. He stopped making excuses for his wife and started trying to be a father to his daughter, teaching her not about status, but about resilience and kindness. A month after the confrontation, a small, hand-delivered package arrived at Alara's apartment. It was for Lily. Inside was not an expensive toy or a designer dress. It was a small, intricately crafted wooden birdhouse, sanded smooth and smelling of cedar. Tucked inside was a handwritten note on simple paper in Richard's slightly shaky script. "Dear Lily," it read, "I am very sorry for how you were treated in our home. There is no excuse for it. I was not a good uncle to you. I hope one day you can forgive me. I built this for you. I hope the birds like it. Love, Uncle Richard." Elara read the note over Lily's shoulder. She felt a flicker of something unexpected. Not forgiveness, not yet, but a recognition of genuine remorse. She placed a hand on Lily's shoulder. "It's a beautiful birdhouse," she said softly. "What do you think we should do with it?" The decision was Lily's. The power, in this small personal way, was now hers. It was another piece of the new foundation Elara was so carefully building. Months passed. The autumn of the confrontation gave way to the cold clarity of winter, and then the tentative hope of spring. The new world settled into its rhythms. Elara, as the new CEO of the rebranded Apex Engineering, was a revelation. She streamlined operations, fostered a culture of innovation and respect, and implemented a generous profit-sharing plan for all employees. The company, freed from the weight of Richard's anxieties and Beatrice's expensive tastes, began to thrive in ways it never had before. Productivity was up, morale was up, profits were up. Elara wasn't just a brilliant strategist, she was a natural leader. Lily was thriving too. Secure in Elara's unwavering love and support, her innate brightness returned, stronger than before. She was at the top of her class, had a close circle of friends, and her artwork, now bold and confident, won a citywide student competition. The birdhouse from Uncle Richard hung in a tree outside their window, and it was a frequent topic of conversation. Lily had decided they would write him a thank you note, a simple one, which Alara had mailed without comment. It was a small bridge, but it was a start. One sunny afternoon, Ilara met Marcus Thorne for coffee. He had become a trusted friend and advisor. He looked at her, sitting across the small cafe table, bathed in sunlight, and he shook his head with a smile. "I've prosecuted mob bosses, corrupt politicians, and Wall Street fraudsters," he said, taking a sip of his espresso. "But I have to admit, your brand of justice is the most elegant I've ever seen. You didn't just ruin them, you forced them to become better people." Ilara smiled, a genuine, relaxed smile that reached her eyes. "It wasn't about revenge, Marcus. It was never about making them suffer. It was about correcting an imbalance. It was a market correction. Beatrice's personal stock was artificially inflated by arrogance and an unearned sense of entitlement. All I did was trigger a market event that revealed its true value." "And Richard?" "Richard was a failing asset tied to a toxic fund," she continued, the metaphor coming easily. "I separated them, gave him a new portfolio, and now he's showing slow but steady growth." She paused, her expression softening. "He's trying. He's taking Amelia to volunteer at a soup kitchen on weekends. He's teaching her what Beatrice never would have." "And Beatrice?" Thorne asked. "Beatrice is in the long, slow process of a leveraged buyout of her own soul," Alara said. "The price is steep, and it's being paid in humility. I don't know if she'll ever fully recover, but she's no longer in a position to harm anyone else. And in the end, that's what this was always about, protecting Lily." The true measure of wealth, she had come to understand, was not found in a bank statement or a stock portfolio. It was in the quiet moments, in Lily's easy laughter, in the respect of her colleagues, in the peaceful sleep that came from a clear conscience. Integrity was the only asset that could never be devalued. Patience and strategy, she had proven, would always triumph over arrogance and cruelty. She hadn't just won a battle, she had restored a fundamental moral order, proving that true strength is not in the power you display, but in the character you possess when no one is watching. What Beatrice had failed to understand is that some people are not defined by what they have, but by who they are. And who you are is the one thing no one can ever take away from you, but it is also something you can lose all by yourself, one small, cruel choice at a time. It's a powerful lesson, isn't it? About the difference between perceived value and true worth. Have you ever encountered a situation where someone was completely underestimated, only to reveal a hidden strength that changed everything? We would love to hear your story in the comments below. Your experiences give these narratives so much more meaning. And if this story resonated with you, please give it a like and subscribe to our channel for more tales of justice, redemption, and the quiet power of integrity. Until next time, remember to be kind. You never know who you're talking to.